The placing of the boy in the cage with a monkey is an outrage. The Negro race in America has a hard enough time as it is in getting away from the prejudice that is closely related to the monkey without having a member of the race placed on exhibition.
Leading men of science from Harvard and Princeton and Columbia University were saying that Africans were midway between an orangutan and a human being. So 100 years later, it should not come as much of a surprise that many people still cling to these notions of European superiority, African inferiority.
The year was 1859. 3 months after Charles Darwin published his book On the Origin of Species, American promoter P.T. Barnum unveiled a new attraction at his popular museum in New York City. It featured what was described as the What Is It, or man-monkey. Visitors were told that the creature had been captured by hunters in Africa, who discovered a race of beings roving among the trees and branches like apes and monkeys. Museum staff declared that the creature had been pronounced by scientists as a connecting link between African blacks and lower animals. In reality, Barnum's so-called man-monkey was an African-American man named William Henry Johnson. Thanks to Barnum, Johnson spent much of his life on public display as an evolutionary missing link, sometimes in a cage. Many reporters at the time were happy to promote the deception. The New York Tribune declared that Barnum's performer seemed to be a cross between an ape species and a Negro, while another paper declared,
"The head is shaped like that of a monkey, but the face is more like that of an African Negro of the lower order. It has been pronounced by naturalists as a specimen of the connecting link between man and monkey."
Many more supposed missing links were marketed to the public at freak shows throughout America. In the 1880s, there was Crow, promoted as living proof of Darwin's theory of the descent of man. She was described as a perfect specimen of the step between man and monkey. Actually, Crow was a young woman from Southeast Asia who suffered from hypertrichosis, a rare genetic condition that produces excessive hair. In the early 1900s, there was Congo, the ape man, usually exhibited in a cage next to a chimpanzee. Most of these early presentations of missing links were crude hoaxes put forward by hucksters, not scientists. But the quest to dramatize the lower stages of human evolution eventually reached far beyond freak shows. It ultimately involved the most elite members of the scientific community, and it was given a platform at one of the most celebrated events in early 20th century America. Today, Forest Park in St. Louis is a place for walking, or riding a bicycle, or spending a quiet Sunday afternoon. But more than a century ago, it was one of the most visited locations in the entire United States, the site of the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. Attracting more than 19 million visitors, the World's Fair was known for its lavish neoclassical buildings, its 22-story-high Ferris wheel, and the public debut of innovations such as the X-ray machine and the ice cream cone. But the fair had a darker side. Organizers imported thousands of indigenous peoples from around the world to be put on public display in what was essentially a giant human zoo. Unlike freak shows, the Human Zoo in St. Louis was created with the cooperation of America's scientific establishment. The man behind the Human Zoo was anthropologist William McGee. One of the nation's leading scientists, McGee had already served as acting president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. In 1903, he was asked to head the anthropology department for the World's Fair. McGee had grand plans of presenting the story of human evolution by displaying representatives of what he considered lower stages of the human race. McGee's plans reflected the ideas of mainstream anthropology of the time.
Anthropology was kind of founded on this idea of mapping civilization from the highest to the lowest, right? With the lowest at that time said to be Africans, and then you sort of move up. Leading men of science from Harvard and Princeton and Columbia University were saying that Africans were midway between an orangutan and a human being.
Like many scientists of his day, McGee drew inspiration for his ideas on human development from Darwin's theory that humans had evolved from ape-like ancestors.
Darwin's theory provided a template for categorizing Africans as biological inferiors. His impact created a bandwagon effect on many scholars on both sides of the Atlantic. Africans were demeaned with terms like savages.
Hello, everyone.
I've been sent to Australia on a mission to film the Aborigines and to try and understand their future in Australian society. This is my first journey to visit the Aussies. I can't wait to meet my first Aborigines, but in Sydney, the descendants of the first inhabitants of the island are nowhere to be found. Tell me, do you know where I can find the Aboriginal people?
Where can you find Aboriginal people? You can find some in the city areas. In Sydney, for example, they're in the areas around Redfern. But a lot of Aboriginal people also live in the outback parts of Australia, particularly in the Northern Territory, in the northern part of Queensland and in Western Australia.
Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory and also in Sydney.
There aren't very many in Sydney, but a lot in the far north of Queensland.
Aboriginal people, usually outside the main cities, is probably the best bet, but further north.
Geographically, the most you'll find will probably be, they prefer to be out on the land, a lot of them.
There are around 390,000 Aborigines in Australia, and that accounts for only 2% of the total population. The Northern Territory is the only Australian state where they have a significant presence. In the Northern Territory, the Aborigines account for 30% of the population. So this is the region I decide to head to. After a long journey of almost 4,000 kilometres, I finally arrive in the small town of Katherine. My first impression upon arrival is of a people completely lost in a white man's world. What's happened to them? The history of the country will one day acknowledge that the white settlers denied the Aborigines a lot of their land. They killed many Aborigines, deported others, and deprived them of their rights. What do they have left? I was advised not to trust my first impressions, and to go and see Tommy in Beswick, who can tell me about his people.
One time there was a son of a witch doctor. He went hunting in the hills, and at sunset like this, he hunted until he couldn't see no more, but the hills have already parted. And the Mimis got this person and took them into the hills, in the cave where they live. And there they sang and they danced. And he didn't want to come back. But the witch doctor from the village, he went down, he sang to the ground and his hair grew like a vine, went around the sun's arm. And he sang, and the power of that song pulled this person out of that. As we, in life, we are so easy to please, with alcohol and things like that. And we're like that young hunter who's gone into the caves of the release. But there's no more witch doctors to sing the songs. However it is, destruction is with alcoholism everywhere. These are beautiful people, and I've seen that change. They were beautiful women. Now they're all busted up, twisted. What happened to my sister? We have to paint, we have to sing, we have to dance. Because when the government men come one day and say, can you sing? We're going to say, sit down, we'll show to you, we'll sing. It means a lot in this whole country, all of Australia, all the Aboriginal people should wake up. Seriously, wake up. I can let him dance when you were drunk, true? You mustn't do him like that. You got fun tonight.
Tommy and his wife Fleur are organising a Corroboree tonight, a traditional Aboriginal ceremony.
I like the way you think you can do the door for me.
Tell her that she'll take over.
Oh, sure. Oh, not at all.
I'm dancing.
I've learned that when they first came face to face with them, the Aborigines mistook the white settlers for spirits. In order to confront these spirits as equals, the Aborigines covered their own bodies in flour or white powder. This custom lives on today in every Aboriginal ceremony. To the Aborigines, white is the colour of death and spirits.
Burbuck Boone was preparing some wood for the fire in order to provide warmth and light for his family. He added some wood to the fire because he had noticed that one of the logs had hollowed out and a family of termites.
I always fucking hated on him.